The fire crackled and hissed, throwing flickering shadows across the worn faces of my grandchildren. Outside, the wind howled through the ancient pines surrounding the cabin, rattling the windows like the desperate claws of unseen creatures. Leaned closer to the circle of wide-eyed children gathered at my feet, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tonight I'm going to tell you a story," I said. "A story I've never told before. A story that has haunted me all my life. A story from a place called Hollow's End, where the shadows are darker than the night, and the ashes still burn with a whisper you cannot escape." They shifted closer, the flames reflecting in their eager eyes. "Listen well," I warned, "because some stories can follow you home." I was 12 when my family moved to Eldermire, a small town swallowed by mountain mists and ancient woods. We came from the city. No trees as tall as the sky, no secrets hidden in the dark. Our new home was called Hollow's End, a sprawling stone house perched on the edge of a ridge overlooking a tangled forest. The house was old, older than anyone in town could say, with ivy strangling its walls and windows like empty eyes staring down at the valley below. I remember the first time I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and smoke, and something else, something sour and bitter I couldn't name. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and the walls seemed to pulse, alive with silent memories. That night, as rain hammered against the roof and the wind groaned in the chimneys, I found a diary buried beneath a loose floorboard in the attic. The cover was cracked, pages yellowed and brittle. "Beware the whispers in the ashes," I read aloud, the words crawling across my skin like cold fingers. From that moment on, nothing was the same. The next few nights were restless. At first, it was just sounds, soft murmurs like voices carried on the wind. Then the whispers grew louder, clearer, slipping through the cracks in the walls and filling the silence. I would lie awake, heart pounding, listening to the voices. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, full of sorrow and rage, as if the house itself was crying out from some deep wound. One night I followed the sounds to the cellar. The door was heavy, its iron handle cold and rough beneath my trembling fingers. The air below was thick and stale, heavy with the scent of burnt wood and something far older, decay. Deep in the shadows, I saw strange symbols scratched into the stone walls, glowing faintly green in the darkness. The whispers surged louder, wrapping around me like smoke, and I felt eyes watching from every corner. I ran then, up the stairs and into the safety of my room, but the whispers never left. They crept into my dreams, turning them into nightmares where the house breathed and pulsed like a living thing. Eldermire itself seemed trapped in time. The people were wary, their eyes flickering with fear whenever I mentioned Hollow's End. My parents dismissed my fears as childish fantasy, but I found a friend in Emma, a local girl with eyes like storm clouds and a heart fearless enough to chase shadows. Emma told me stories her grandmother whispered about, tales of the Harrington family who had lived in Hollow's End before us. The Harringtons had vanished. During a terrible fire decades ago, the house scorched and left to rot, but some said the fire never truly burned out. "The ashes, remember?" Emma said, her voice low. "They keep the pain alive." Together, we searched old records, dusty newspapers, anything that might explain the voices and the strange symbols I'd found. The more we uncovered, the heavier the darkness seemed to grow. My grandmother visited often, and when I told her about the whispers, she grew pale and silent. Then she shared a secret I was too young to understand at first. A family curse tied to Hollow's End. A darkness born long ago when blood was spilled in its halls. She told me how her own father had lived here once, how he'd heard the same whispers and how it had broken him. Some places hold on to pain, she said softly. "And some spirits never rest. You must be strong, my boy. The house will test you." One night, driven by a mixture of fear and stubbornness, I returned to the cellar with Emma. The green symbols glowed brighter, pulsing with a terrible energy. The whispers turned to voices, pleading, angry, desperate. And then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. Not quite human, shifting like smoke and ash, eyes burning with a cold fire. It spoke my name. The figure in the cellar was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It shifted and shimmered, as if it were made of smoke and ash, its form barely held together by a flickering cold light. Its eyes, two burning coals, pierced through the darkness and fixed on me with terrible intent. It spoke. My name, voice hollow and cracked like the wind through dead trees. Ezra. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Emma gripped my hand tightly, her own face pale but resolute. "Why are you here?" I whispered, barely daring to breathe. The figure's shape writhed, twisting into glimpses of faces long gone, their expressions twisted in agony. Then it stretched out what might have been an arm, pointing toward the far corner of the cellar. The ashes remember. They keep the curse alive. Blood must be paid. Before I could respond, the figure dissolved into a swirl of smoke that vanished through the cracked stone walls, leaving only the bitter scent of burnt wood and something colder, like forgotten sorrow. Shaken but determined, I returned to the attic, clutching the diary I'd found earlier. The pages had something more, something I hadn't noticed before. A map, faint and barely visible, drawn in spidery ink across the last few sheets. It showed the layout of Hollow's End. Secret rooms, hidden passages, and beneath it all, a chamber marked only as the Heart of Ash. Emma and I spent days searching, guided by the map and whispered warnings. We found false walls behind bookcases, floorboards that shifted to reveal dark tunnels, and finally, a door carved with the same eerie symbols from the cellar. With trembling hands, I pushed it open. The chamber was vast and suffocating, lit only by flickering candles that seemed to burn with a pale, unnatural flame. Ashes carpeted the floor, swirling as if stirred by a breath unseen. In the center lay a stone altar, blackened and cracked, stained with old blood and something darker. I stepped closer. The whispers returned, louder now, urgent and frantic. "Release us! Break the circle!" On the altar rested an object wrapped in tattered cloth, a small, charred box, sealed tight with iron clasps. Emma reached out and broke the seal. Inside was a faded photograph of a family, the Harringtons, their faces twisted in terror and sorrow. Beneath it, a small, charred journal detailed the final days before the fire. The last entries spoke of a ritual gone wrong, a bargain made with a force that fed on grief and fear, a force that had trapped the souls of the family and cursed the house forever. That night, my grandmother arrived unexpectedly, her eyes heavy with grief. She told us the full story, how the Harrington patriarch had tried to save his dying wife by turning to an ancient spirit buried beneath the earth, a spirit bound by ash and flame. But the bargain came at a terrible price. The spirit fed on their pain, she said, tied their souls to the house, twisted their love into a prison of endless torment. She warned us that the whispers were the cries of those trapped souls, desperate for release. But the spirit demanded blood to break the curse. "You must leave," she urged. "This place is death." But I knew then I could not. The house had claimed me as it had them. That night, the whispers became screams. I awoke to the cabin shaking, the fire in the hearth flickering wildly as shadows poured from the walls. Emma and I tried to flee, but the house shifted. Doors vanished, windows warped, trapping us inside its ever-changing maze. Figures emerged from the darkness, faces of the lost Harringtons, twisted and pleading, reaching for us with desperate hands. The ashen spirit appeared again, its cold flames licking the air. You opened the box. Now the curse awakens. Blood must be paid. Emma grabbed my arm, eyes wide. What do we do? I realized the truth. To free the souls and end the curse, a sacrifice was needed. A sacrifice of love, courage, and perhaps life itself. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as if the house itself was alive and watching our every move. Emma and I stumbled through the endless corridors of Hollow's End, the ghostly faces trailing us, whispering mournful laments. The ashen spirit's voice echoed in my mind. Blood must be paid. I knew then what grandmother had meant. The curse demanded a sacrifice, not just any blood, but one bound by love and hope. Emma's grip tightened on my hand. Ezra, we have to end this. But how? How do you fight a darkness that feeds on your fears and memories? Desperation drove us back to the heart of ash. The altar's blackened surface seemed to pulse with energy, the ashes swirling faster, as if eager for release. Grandmother's words came to me. The circle must be broken. With trembling hands, I traced the symbols from the diary, chanting the ancient incantation she had taught me, a prayer to sever the bonds of pain. The air thickened, charged with power. The ghosts screamed in agony, their forms flickering, like dying flames. The ashen spirit roared, a sound like burning wood and shattered glass. Then, in a blinding flash, silence. When I opened my eyes, the house was still. The shadows had retreated, the whispers gone. Emma and I collapsed, exhausted, but alive. Outside, dawn broke over Eldermeyer. The mist was lifting, the forest silent and serene. But something had changed in me. The darkness had marked my soul. Grandmother held me close, tears in her eyes. You were brave, she said. But remember, some ashes never die. Some whispers never leave. Years passed. Hollow's End stood empty, a silent monument to the past. But the memories lingered, the whispers, the eyes in the dark, the cold touch of ash. I tried to forget, to live a normal life. But every night, as the fire crackled and the shadows flickered, I hear it. A whisper just beyond hearing, a voice calling from the ashes. And I warn you, my children and grandchildren, listen well. Some stories follow you home. Long after the fire has died and the ashes have cooled, the whisper remains. It waits in the dark corners of your mind, in the silence after the storm, in the cold breath on the back of your neck. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough by the firelight, you might hear it. Ezra. The house remembers. The ashes remember. And the curse is never truly broken. Years after we fled Hollow's End, the real horror began. Not in the house, but inside my own mind. The whispers never truly left me. They returned in the silence of night, not just voices but memories, warped and tangled. Faces I never saw in the house, yet I knew them. Ghostly reflections of my own fears. At times I questioned what was real and what was nightmare. I saw shadows where none should be, heard footsteps when the house was far behind. My own reflection sometimes seemed to flicker, as if it wasn't quite mine. Emma disappeared soon after. No one knows where she went. Some say she ran from the curse. Others say the whispers claimed her, just as they tried to claim me. I never wanted to go back to Eldermeyer, but the call was relentless, a force drawing me like a moth to flame. Decades later, I found myself standing once again before Hollow's End. The house looked as though time had stopped. walls crumbling, windows shattered, but the hearth's chimney still smoked faintly, as if the house itself still breathed. Inside, the air was thick with ash and sorrow. The symbols on the walls pulsed weakly, and the whispers stirred from their long sleep. I realized then that the curse was tied not to the house, but to me. Gathering what strength I had left, I came here, to this cabin, to you, my grandchildren, to tell this story, to warn you. The whispers are patient. They wait for the right moment, the weak heart, the curious soul. And if you ever find yourself drawn to an old house with ashes in the hearth, remember my words. Beware the whispers in the ashes, because sometimes the ashes are not just ashes. They are the remnants of souls trapped forever between life and death. And sometimes those souls are closer than you think. I see your eyes growing wide, and maybe you think this is just a story. But listen closely, for all these years I have lived with the knowledge that the curse was never broken. It was never about the house. It was about me, because the whisper, the voice that calls my name, is not just outside, it's inside. And now, as I sit here by this fire, I feel it stirring once more. The ashes at my feet aren't just the remains of burned wood. They are the remains of my own soul, slowly turning to ash. The house was never Hollow's end. It was Hollow's beginning.